Okay, today is October 29th, 2021, and we are working on a warm-up here from Chapter 6 on fractions, Grade 8. We have 4 questions to warm up. The first question is pretty simple. It says 3/4 times 4/5. Now, there are two trains of thought on this. 3/4 times 4/5. There's actually 3 ways to do it. The first way you could have solved it was by drawing it. And you can say, I want to find 3/4 of 4/5. So I could have cut it into fifths, shaded in 4/5. Okay? And if I interpret this entire sentence as being 3/4 of 4/5, I could take 3/4 of it. So half quarters, that's 1/4 right here. Oh, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 of 4/5. If I look at my denominator after I made my cuts, there are 20 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which in lowest terms is going to be 3/5. Agreed? Because I can divide both by 4. That's one way you could have solved it. Another way you could have solved it, if I go back in time to here, is I could have simply said, okay, I'm multiplying two fractions. To get the answer, I can multiply my numerators and multiply my denominators, and I get 12 over 20, which reduces down to 3 over 5. That's the second way you could have done it. Or, for the very sophisticated people in our math class, since they picked up on this idea of cross reduction last class, they could say, because I'm multiplying the numerators and because I'm multiplying the denominators, if I swap those numerators and did 4 times 3 instead of 3 times 4, we know that that would not affect the product. I'd still get 10 or 12 out of 20, which would reduce down to 3 over 5. But if I thought about if this was the question, what would I have started with as a question? The answer would have been you would have had 4 over 4 times 3 over 5. But any sane person, when given that question, 4 over 4 times 3 over 5, would have said, well, I want to reduce this fraction to start. 4 over 4 will become 1 over 1. And therefore, when I multiply my numerators, I get 3. And multiply my denominators, I get 5. And I get that final answer of 3/5 without having to rewrite the question or without having to reduce my final answer. And what that looks like, all of this thinking that goes in here doesn't really happen there. It happens in your original question. Knowing that swapping the numerator can be a thing, I would put lines through those 4 and 4, just like I did here, and put a 1 and a 1. And then I would say, okay, now I've reduced that by cross reduction. Multiply the numerators, I get 3. Multiply the denominators, I get 5, and that's my final answer. Question 2 is the exact same question, but instead of multiplying it, it's adding it. I want you to think about this when you do this. Because with this one, the multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators is a piece of cake. And one student yesterday told me, I don't know how, that adding fractions is easier than multiplying. I can't remember who that was. But really, it's much more difficult because the first thing you need to consider is what is your common denominator, 20. You then need to make equivalent fractions, 15/20ths, 16/20ths. You then need to add your numerators, but instead of multiplying or adding your denominators with adding and subtracting, you keep them. So there's a significant difference with this process. Add your numerators, you get 31. Keep your denominator, you get 20. Your final answer will be 1 and 11/20ths. It's not hard, it's just there's a lot more work to it than it is with multiplication. With the third question, we have a 6.1 question here. This is from 6.1. And we have a 6.2 question with division of fractions by whole numbers. So we have really 2 different chapters in this one BEDMAS question. We have 3 operations, multiplication, addition, and division. So we're going to do all of our multiplication division first. We'll start with the multiplication. If I have 3/4 and I triple it, how many quarters would you have in total? 9 quarters. If you tripled 3/4, you would have 9 quarters. And if you had 2/3, I'm just going to draw just so you can get a visual idea of this. I have 2/3 of a pizza, and I'm dividing it between 2 people. Do I need to make any cuts? I don't need to make cuts because if you think about it, if I'm dividing 2/3 of a pizza between 2 people, this person will get 1 and this person will get 1. How much of a pizza does each person get? A third. So 2/3 divided by 2 without having to worry about, how to get the answer. Just think about it rationally and you get 1/3. Now we have the addition of 2 fractions that have different denominators. So with addition, I need to keep a common denominator of 12, LCD. Your equivalent fraction here will be 27/12. Your equivalent fraction here will be 4/12. Add your numerators in addition and keep your denominator. Don't add those denominators. You get 31/12, which is equal to 2 and 7/12 as a final mixed answer. And the last question is a BEDMAS question with multiplication and addition. So we're going to do our multiplication first. Now, what would a smart person look for with a multiplication of two fractions? Can you cross-reduce? Because remember, to solve this question, I'm going to multiply my numerators and multiply my denominators. But if I swap that, both of these will be the same answer, won't they? If I do it, both are going to be 4/40ths. So if I consider this one, then this would have been 4/8 times 1/5. What would I have reduced 4/8 to start? I would not have used that as my fraction. What would I have used? 1/2. So because that would be true, I'm going to put lines through here and put a 1 up here and a 2 down there. Now, instead of starting with that, what is the product of my fraction numerators now? 1. What's the product of my denominator since it's hidden behind my eraser? 10. So to multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators, I'm going to get 1/10. So I'm going to leave that there. Now 1/2 plus 1/10. What do I do when I have a mixed fraction for addition, even though I don't need to? I always change it to improper. You don't have to. I'll leave it like this if you want. So we're adding a mixed fraction to a fraction. I'm going to bring down the whole number and just focus on what do the fractional parts added together equal. Common denominator will be 10. Equivalent fraction would be 5/10. What is the sum of 5/10 and 1/10? 6/10. What's that in lowest terms? 3/5. So the fractional parts of this equation add up to be 3/5 plus the one that I already brought down. Your final answer for this question is 1 3/5.